slope. The slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This is the change in y over the change in x. This is how we find slope when we are given 2 points. 1 point we're going to call x sub 1, y sub 1. That just means it's the first point. And the second point is x sub 2, y sub 2. That simply means the first point and the second point. We find the change in y over the change in x. So we're setting it up as a proportion. So if you're looking at your handout, we're going to do number 1, which says, change colors here. 1 is 3, negative 5, negative 2, positive 5. So the first point is 3, negative 5. So I'm going to call that x1, y1. So we're going to label the first point x1, y1. Again, that's simply identifying that it's the first point they gave us. The second point is going to be x2, y2, just identifying it as the second point they gave us. We're doing the change in y over the change in x. Change just means difference. Difference means subtraction. So technically it doesn't really matter which one you start with, but you're subtracting the y values, you're subtracting the x values. If I start with the second point for y, I have to start with the second point for x. If you started with the first point, you need to start with the first point for x. Okay? Now I'm going to subtract these numbers. So y2 is 5. You should be writing this on your paper. Minus my negative 5. Divided by negative 2 minus positive 3. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Forgot to hit record. Maybe it was already recording. Okay, never mind then. That means it caught all of that. But that's okay. Alright, so we have 5 minus negative 5. What happens when you have minus a negative? It becomes a positive, so the negatives cancel, so we have 5 plus 5, which is 10. Now I have negative 2 minus 3, which is negative 5. And then we simplify the fraction, which is 2 over 1 or negative 2. You could say negative 2 or you could say negative 2 over 1. It does not really matter if you put the negative sign in the numerator, in the denominator, or just out in front. It's all the same thing. So just to recap, we labeled the first point x1, y1. We labeled the second point x2, y2. Then we put the numbers into our formula. 5 minus negative 5 divided by negative 2 minus 3. We added the two numbers in the top because the negatives canceled out. We added the two numbers in the bottom because two negatives gave you a negative 5. And then we divided 10 divided by negative 5 to get a negative 2. All right, let's move on to number 2. Number 2, the point is negative 5, 0, and 5, negative 2. I'm going to take the first point that they gave you and I'm going to label it x1, y1, because that's the first point they gave us. I'm going to label the second point x2, y2, because that's the second point they gave us. Then we plug it into the formula and subtract the y's, and subtract the x's. So I'm going to take my y2, which is my negative 2, minus y1, which is 0. And then I'm going to take my x2, which is 5, minus my x1, which is a negative 5. So then I have negative 2 minus 0, which is just negative 2. We have a double negative here, so that makes it a plus. So that's 5 plus 5, which is 10. You can simplify this, which would be negative 1 over 5. And that would be your slope. Now let's look at how we find slope or rate of change from a graph. Slope or rate of change is rise over run, which still means the change in y over the change in x, because rise means vertical and run means across. So that's the y-axis over the x-axis. You're going to pick 2 points on the graph. For this first one, it already labeled them for you. And you're going to write that right triangle. You're going to make that right triangle and count your boxes. How many did you have to go up? 1. And how many did we have to go over? 2. So that means your rise over your run is 1 over 2. That is your slope, which is the same thing as rate of change. Okay? No, we're not doing Pythagorean theorem. Pythagorean theorem would tell you what the length of this side is, and I don't want to know what the length of C is. I just want to know the distance. How would you go from one point to the other? Okay? So if I look at number 2, I'm going to draw my right triangle, and then I'm going to count my boxes. I had to go down first, so that would be a negative 2, and then I went positive 2. So that means my rise over run would be negative 2, because I had to go down, over a positive 2, which we can simplify to negative 1, or you can say negative 1 over 1. That's all there is to it when we're graphing. Draw your right triangle, and then count your boxes. And it's rise over run. Okay? If we wanted to use the slope formula, I could pick those 2 points and use the slope formula as well. Okay? But when you have it graphed, rise over run might be the easiest way to find the slope. Let's do one more together. We look at number 3. I have 2 points labeled. I'm going to rise, and then I'm going to run. How much did I have to rise? 1. How much did I have to run? 2. So my slope is 1 over 2. Yes? Exactly. If we look at number 5, you have a rise of 0. So your rise is 0. Your run is 1. What is the fraction 0 over 1? It's 0. If you have 0 in the numerator, your answer is just 0. So that has a 0 slope. I could walk on a flat surface. Okay, the slope of that surface is just 0. Now, if we look at, while we're at it, if you look down here at number 8, what's the rise? It could be 2, you could say 1. In this case, those 2 points is a rise of 2. But what's your run? 0. So your rise is 2, but your run is 0. What happens when you have a fraction with 0 in the denominator? It's undefined. Okay? All right.